I'll just leave it here.
Okay, yeah.
Y'all ready? Good. All right, well, it's about 7, so I think we'll get started. Welcome everybody to the Granville Sports Society. This is our sports program of growing up in Granville. Before we get too much further, Historical Society does have a new director. Bailey, is back here. Not only new, she's the only one we've ever had. See how this all shakes out. She's interested in watching what happens. Who are you? I am Greg Dixon. I am program co-chair. This is how it's kind of going to work tonight, and what we've always done.
Your cameraman is telling you to use the mic.
Do I just hold this?
Yes. Just hold it because we'll pass it later.
Good. Anyway, Amy Welsh will be our kind of a moderator, and she'll throw a question out or a subject out, and these people will go with it. You are welcomed and encouraged to add your 2 cents if you need to. We do ask if you could to state your name, and if you went to Granville, maybe your year that you graduated. That's not to. It's not really to make you liable for anything that you might say. It's more for Chuck's benefit when he rewrites the article. Which, by the way, I'm going to tell a little snippet of each of the 3 ones we've had before. But if you would like, there's a better rundown right above, because we've done the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And these are available for $2 each. If you act tonight, we can give you all 3 for $6. So, you got to be quick though. Let's see. In the 50s, we learned, one of the main things we learned that the Gregory Hardware store had a shooting gallery that was pretty much unsupervised. Didn't need parental consent. You just walked in, there was loaded guns around. So that was a little bit of a shock to me. That was in the 50s. In the 60s, we had talked about movies at the Opera House, bowling above what is now the Lot restaurant down on North Prospect, and talked a lot about Spring Valley. I think all of them will probably talk about Spring Valley. 70s, the bowling alley became a coffee house teen center, which I never went to. Apparently had kids at that time. With the Granville Pizza below, which still gets my vote as the best pizza ever in Granville. So, and they also remembered the family charge accounts uptown, where as a parent you would get this bill for like 25 cents for a Coke or a vanilla Coke or a candy bar, and all those things would be itemized on your little bill. No credit cards. You just your family had an account. So I guess the one common thread is that so far everybody agrees that Granville's a pretty nice place to grow up. And I guess we'll find out if these kids agree. We'll turn it over to Amy for the introductions, and then we'll let it go. See what happens.
Okay. I'm Amy Welsh. So I'm the granddaughter, for those of you who are a little older, of Carl Welsh, who had Welsh's Grocery, which was one of the places you could buy the penny candy and keep a tab. And a couple of years ago, my aunt, I didn't know, had the book. And but it was the old book. Like none of you were probably in it. It started with Mr. Perry, who he took the store from in 1938, and it had a list of the merchants and what he was buying from the merchants and the prices, and then it had family names on it. The only thing we wished it didn't have, and we wish it did, is it would have a family name and it had a date and a number, but it didn't say like milk how much. It just said what the total was for whatever you charged that day. So it's up here now. We gave it to the Historical Society. So I was the class of 90. And then we have, I'll go in the order of oldest to youngest. We have Ben Barton, the class of 82. We have Kristen Van Meter McGonigal, the class of 86. Amy Parsley White, also the class of 90. Ben Dills, the class of 92. And Jennifer Bringart Graham, class of 93. And I should also say the other connection I have, and that's why I got talked into being the moderator, is I am the secretary for the Granville Historical Society. I am also currently a teacher at Granville High School. So I have that connection also right now. So, so we're going to start with just one question, and this might be the last time you hear from me. If you guys just keep talking and talking. So I know one of the conversations that always comes up, so we can't ignore it, is Spring Valley. I don't have a lot of stories. I hate to even say this to record this, but Jim Welsh was never going to pay for a membership to Spring Valley when my great aunt had a pool. You can go to the pool. I'm not paying for Spring Valley. So I think I went to Spring Valley, like I can count on one hand how many times. And some of those were as a chaperone once I was a teacher. So I just didn't go to Spring Valley a lot. So I don't know. That's my Spring Valley story. So yeah. So we do need to pass a, yeah. Okay. Well, my story was that I worked there, I swam there, and managed to do it. And the way I got to work, we lived in Snowden off Wellsworth Road, and my parents gave me a really nice bike. And so I rode my bike all along Wellsworth Road to Spring Valley, and that was I think my sister's gonna come in. Even the kids out in the sticks had, things we were allowed to do. Anyone else? Uh-oh. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as most of you know, Spring Valley obviously was a magical place. That one's dead. Perfect. Most of you in here obviously had experienced Spring Valley at some point. For those of you who didn't, again, it was a magical place. You know, as a kid, we're very fortunate. Most of us, well, Ben can tell you his story later. It's pretty good. But, you know, to go there, my siblings, Becky, Tracy, Doug, we're all older. I was the youngest, obviously, but it literally was just like a large playground. Not only just hanging out in the sand, playing basketball, playing kickball with Ben Barton for 3 hours. But like you could venture into the woods. So the nature preserve that it is now, a lot of times kids would just wander on back to the woods. You know, I know when Chuck and I did this before, I said, do you want the PG version, PG-13 or the R version? But anyway, you know, a lot of kids ventured into the woods, but it was such a special place. And that's why I think it's hard for a lot of people to go there now and see it as it is. But again, great place. Learned how to swim there. Learned how to do flips from my sister Becky on the high dive. You know, it was just, again, great place. I eventually ended up being a lifeguard. And I was telling Amy earlier, I think I benched myself once, but I don't know if that's possible. But yeah, great place. So anyway.
No, so to his point, and it's true. And when Ben was probably 5, maybe less, I don't know, who knows. He was so athletic and so much fun to hang out with that he and I would go, and he would like tug on my shirt and say, "Hey, let's go play kickball." So he and I would go play kickball, and you know, you're thinking it's like rest period, 3 hours. I mean, me and a 5-year-old, I mean, for 3 hours, it was great. But the thing that he and I were just talking about, I wasn't allowed to have membership either. So there's that. But I never missed a day. So there's that. And then, I mean, literally for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, I never joined. I paid to get in. It was like $1 or $2, depending on the year. I don't know, for 7 or 8 years. And then I got kicked out for life. And I was like a senior in high school, so it was okay. But I came back with a friend to her 25th reunion. So I'm probably, maybe I was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years younger. And I walk in and Mary's there, and she says, "Didn't you get kicked out for life?" I'm like, "I did." I go, and I'm really sorry for everything I did because I didn't know about the repercussions of sneaking into a business. And she's like, "That's all you had to say." She goes, "I accept your apology." And I was like, "That's it? I mean, I could have done that earlier." So, but no, I mean, I was lucky. I mean, truly, we were blessed to have the place. I just couldn't talk my parents into paying, I don't know what it was, $40, $80 to join. I couldn't, they wouldn't do it. So I never joined, but it was a great place.
I was a lifeguard there for 5 years, like Kristen and Ben. As a kid, my parents used to drop us off, which is strange to think about now. But they just knew that the other parents in town would watch out for us. And we knew there was no cell phones, no computers, nothing. We knew by the time we got home, if we stepped out of line, sitting down for dinner, our parents would somehow magically know. But there were always the moms there sitting there knitting or doing needlepoint or reading books.
It was like the who's who of, it was like the,
Yeah,
the
there's a-
Mount Rushmore of tanning.
Yes,
I mean, seriously.
yes, there was. And
Mrs. Allman. I mean,
Yes.
seriously. I mean,
Yeah. The lady that we called Chief. Remember her?
They were double cheeseburgers,
Yes.
pickles and onions, no butter.
yes,
Every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So so it was a neat place to go. And then I was there so much that I might as well start getting paid. So, but I do have to say that the salads and the hot dogs, the way you made them, Kristen, I still make my hot dogs that way.
That girl was disgusting. But
Don't tell me that.
food was excellent.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, and you always took the sticks from your popsicles and dibble dabble at the pool. Stick it in the water fountain and let it go into the pool.
Yes. The sulfur.
Yep.
Or there was like a tube at the very bottom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
This is
Yeah.
third
You
generation.
used to put
here
it
doing
in you used to hold your hand on top of the fountain, let the water stop, drop the stick down, and it would go out into the pool. Yeah.
Creative vacuum.
Yes. This is what happens when you don't have the internet and phones and technology, right? We're very creative. So,
So my family moved to Granville at the end of 85. And my mom was a swimming pool person. So by the time the summer came, we were there all the time, whether she wasn't an early, I mean, I never did swim team or anything, but yeah, definitely formative to, like I can still visualize certain people's tricks off the high dive, kids running and like diving off of that cement wall down into the sand.
Yep.
Oh, well, that too,
Oh,
but
yes,
off
yes.
from the grassy
sidewalk,
area.
yep.
Yeah. So fantastic place.
Okay. Well, and another question that always comes up is about the school and school buildings. And, every era seems to have, we were at this building and then we moved to this building. So I did a real quick research the other day. So 1990 was the year that the levy was passed for the current high school. So I guess we could start with Ben, but because we all know when the middle school we went to was falling apart eventually. But like, do you remember 82, the 82, 80
Oh, yeah, no,
early,
it's-
like what was the middle school like? What was that high school like at that time? And then as we go down the line, like the
Yeah,
changes that happened.
Yeah, so I came here in fourth grade. So I had 1 year in the still elementary school, and then we did year or fifth grade at Union,
Okay.
and then we did 6, 7, 8 at what is now the torn down middle school in Granger. And I didn't know it was in bad shape. I didn't know bad shape from good shape. I didn't care. It was just where you went to school. I knew the steps were hard when you fell down them, assisted by somebody's help. But it was a great school. I mean, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure.
So
mean,
maybe it was
every-
after your.
Everyone ahead of me went to the same place, so that's all you knew, really. But it was a great place. I mean, the lunchroom was the lobby.
Mhm.
That was weird. And then, of course, lunches back then were horrid, right? If you got to pack your lunch, you would end up with this. This is back when microwaves were just out, so they would microwave your hamburger. It'd come out about it's like it was so hot you couldn't touch it. Put it that way. But we all had Mrs. Loomis. I mean, which goes back decades, certainly. But I mean, actually, Jennifer, my wife, has the story when it got torn down and going through it with her dad because that was his high school.
Mhm.
And to be able to rummage through the school before it was torn down was something special. So maybe she can chime in. But for me, it was just our middle school. I mean, we didn't know any different.
Well, maybe it was Ben and Jennifer. Were you guys in the middle school when you couldn't use the theater anymore because of the ceiling?
I think
was
it
it
was
later?
towards the end. Was it the like the light booth or whatever that hung out? The sound booth. Yeah, you
Yeah.
couldn't go under there anymore. So
And it was asbestos too.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm just curious because I wasn't 100% sure. Kristen, did you go to Union?
I did.
But Amy,
And I was just sitting here thinking about the only memory I have of Union. Scott Googans. You guys know, yeah. He, in the middle of town, mooned the volleyball bus as we were driving by. And so his punishment was that he had to wash all the walls of Union School inside, and they were dirty.
mhm,
But yeah, I can't even remember why we were at Union.
Well,
space.
it started off as space.
Yeah.
What about the
And-
chicken pox? I thought it
And
also
no,
had
it was the energy
something.
crisis in the late 70s. Dumbest thing of all time. But Union was had a coal burning furnace. Hence the nasty windows and everything else. I mean,
And walls.
yeah, they're just cold. I mean, what are you gonna do?
But by
The class of '88 was the last.
I was gonna say because by my class, Yeah.
Fifth grade, then
89
Yeah.
we didn't go. So,
But it was really fun because
Yeah,
you were the
it was-
only class
had
out
some.
there. You had the whole building
Well,
to
Yeah.
yourself.
and I was so disappointed because at Christmas
Kristen,
time,
can you pass it to
everybody-
Amy?
Everybody used to get sleds, the little plastic wrap sleds, and they used to put them in their backpack. And I was so excited. I was like, "Oh, my turn's coming! I'm watching 3 siblings all get to do this." And then they stopped sending because at lunchtime you could go out and sled on the little Union Hill.
See, I
And if
didn't.
you
So-
didn't have a sled, Vicky James would get a great big garbage bag, and you could use the garbage bag and get it and slide down there.
I love
You
him,
would come
seriously.
out-
That's a
Yeah.
conversation.
In itself.
That's a separate conversation.
So, yeah.
That's
He's
that.
such a great guy.
He
Such a
was
great guy.
really.
Yeah.
He'd come out and watch while everybody was going down the hill, and if the bag ripped, he'd be like, "I'll be right back." He'd run in, grab another one, and come out.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
Yeah. So middle school for me was you made me think, Ben, when you're talking the lunchroom. I lived on College Street. I grew up on College Street. So we got to lay in bed and listen for the bell and then sprint across the street, hopefully not getting hit by one of the buses. But I used to come home for lunch sometimes. I would get to come home. I actually did an experiment for some class. I did a speech, ran home, cooked it, ran back and finished it in the conversation. But so I enjoyed it. It was a little old, but I kind of thought that made it kind of special. And for the new high school, you were talking about that. I don't know if you remember, our senior year, we got surveyed
Mhm.
about what the new current high school should look like. I'm not really sure why they asked us since we were on our way out. They should have asked the kindergartners because I know we were like, we would like a fireplace and we would like marble counters, and lo and behold, there is a fireplace. So
Yeah.
in the library.
But it's a fake. It's a
Yeah, but
fake.
still. I'm like, you listen to a bunch of 18-year-olds on their way out. So but yeah, so but I enjoyed the middle school. It was a neat building. So
Who went to Union School? Like, what grade was there?
Fifth, just fifth only.
So you were the only group
Yeah.
out
So class of
Okay.
'88 was the last class
Oh,
to go out.
wow, okay.
It was a big deal to be on the bus and drive past the house of the 22 television.
Yes.
And every time.
Everybody duck now.
Yeah.
So now if we skip to what's now the current middle school, but it was the high school, I don't remember what year it was, but I was there, and Mark Smith, Mr. Smith's, the ceiling in his classroom fell.
On me,
Yeah.
on Amy.
Yeah. So that was like,
Wondering what happened.
that was one of the steps that
And my
was like,
locker flooded.
we need a new high school, or we need to do something.
So yeah, we were sitting there in the middle of class talking about, I don't know, some book. Obviously it made a big impression. I don't even remember the book. And I was just kind of sitting at the desk in our kind of the desk chair that connects. And the next thing I know, I just feel somebody grab my desk and lurch it. And I thought they were messing around. And the ceiling tile, like these, had started to swell. We all kind of knew because we had had a lot of rain, but we didn't realize how bad. And that thing just went everywhere. And then that same week, I went to open up my locker, and it had flooded at the top. All my books were wet. So I didn't get any free passes, though. I still had to turn all my stuff in. So, but that was a simple school. I mean, it was an H.
Mhm.
One hallway was freshman, sophomore. The next hallway was senior, junior. I mean, you really couldn't mess it up. So.
Well, let's go ahead because it was already brought up. What about memorable teachers? Now, I will say I was a little disappointed. I never had Loomis. She retired. Well, I heard stories.
Class of 89 was, they forced her, unfortunately,
And Mr. Montgomery.
to retire at the end of the school year. She was not well.
Yeah.
And, yes, it was traumatic year for many
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah.
She was
But you've brought up some other names. I don't know if you have any other stories or.
Mr. Millman always is a good teacher for middle school for us. He was also our DJ for all our middle school dances. So he was fun because he would always dress up, and I'm pretty sure the tapes he made us were somewhat illegal because he was the DJ. So if we brought him $2 in school, he would
Definitely legal now.
right. He would. Sorry, Mr. Millman. He would record the album. So I still have cassette tapes in his handwriting that say like Thriller or whatever that he recorded. And so we would give them to him, and he would record and give us back. And so, I mean, money used to change hands all the time. Right, exactly. So I know. So I say Mr. Millman would be one. Yeah. Mrs. Van Tyne, definitely elementary school. Jody Van Tyne. Gosh, I'm sure you guys can think. My brain's kind of.
I can spurt off a few. Go ahead.
Okay.
So from a memorable perspective, that's not funny. I'm just starting my conversation. Mrs. Barbary was a classic, right? I mean, Kathy, seriously, she was something else. And she was from the South, and she didn't hold back. I mean, the South won the Civil War. The Garden of Eden is in Atlanta.
Georgia was the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, no, we're being taught this. And we're all like, wait a minute. I mean, I don't think that's right, but she's our teacher.
What grade?
5th grade at Union School. And she called the closet a cloak closet, which I've never heard that word in my life, right? I mean, this is hilarious. Then so 6th grade, I had Mr. Tanner. I don't know, you were there too? I think you were. And he was way too friendly, which was a good thing for me until it wasn't. And then there's a paddle in the office on this. Yeah, well, this is 6th grade now, so we're in the middle school.
Ben, how many times did you get now? Either Ben.
Why we got to go there? Why? Yeah. No, so
They
the
broke them all on Ben.
actually my number is 0.
Really?
I was a salesman back then too.
Did you have to hold up the history books?
I had to do all that. Oh yeah, I had to write on the chalkboard. I had to hold up history books. I had to play here to there with Mr. Allen. Remember that?
No.
Anybody? So he had a sawed-off baseball bat on both sides, so planed out on both sides. It was called the board, and he had, engraved it. It's called the board. And if you got into enough trouble, which if you throw a kid into the shop bin, you'll get in trouble for that. The goal was you got to grab your ankles, and he whacks you, and you would jump forward, and he'd hit you again, and you jump forward until you got to cross the room.
From here to there.
From here to there. It was called here to there. And normally, when I got in trouble one time in his class, and I just said, before you hit me, you need to call my dad and get permission.
Oh my God.
I mean, I was guilty. I was done. I go, just call my dad, who was like twice the size of him, and he was big. My dad was bigger. I just call my dad and get permission. If he says yes, then I'm done. And he would not do that. And so he just kind of said, he goes, don't ever do that again. I'm like, okay, deal. And I didn't. But the funny one, in whatever grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, in the middle school still, so in the lobby of the middle school, we would mess around at lunchtime, and we all sat in 2 rows, 2 tables in rows, and Mrs. Loomis was our lunch monitor. And I dropped something, and I went to pick up a coin or something like that, and I leaned over backwards using my feet to hook, against the picnic table thing they had, and reached down, and she saw me, and she comes up and starts hitting me. I'm like, I didn't do anything wrong. And she's just beating on my back. And I didn't care. It didn't hurt. But word travels fast in a little small town and a little small middle school. And before I got out of school, my mom was at school. I didn't call her. And you did not want to cross my mother at all. And Mrs. Loomis had no recollection of doing it. She had literally she goes, I have no idea I did that. Like, and I'm in tears. I'm like 13 years old and I'm crying. I'm like, can we just leave? She doesn't remember. I don't care. And you're mad. So wrap this up and get me out of here. And we had Ken Woodring was our principal.
Gum chewing no.
Gum chewing no. You call it spring fever.
Yeah.
I call it vandalism. Oh my God, this goes back. This is a long time
I
ago.
was going to call you guys out. You never called that out. I'm younger than that, but there was Mr. Woodring.
Go
Is he
ahead.
the middle school principal? I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
yeah.
But Becky used to come home from school and tell me that he would always say, gum chewing no.
Yeah.
So I would go around, to all my friends and say gum chewing no. Interesting. Teacher wise, I'd say teachers to me that had the most impact, I think like elementary school, probably Mrs. Mills, Bridget Mills. She was probably my favorite teacher and to me probably had the most impact. I would say middle school, maybe Kirk Millman. He wasn't selling me tapes though, but I would say probably Kirk Milliman and then Diane Ryan in middle school. High school, the list goes on. As far as impact, Mrs. Hare for sure, Mr. Smith. Probably the most classic across all classes. One was Nick Zaris. Rest in peace. Love that man to death. Yeah. Oh, this is not Barnum and Bailey. This is study hall. I need you to study. So he was like the best, right? And Jim Schreiner. Jim Schreiner, amazing. I don't think. Well, I know that he knew everyone's first name, but he
always had my demerits like
he would call you if you played sports. He would call you by your number. So the first time I was a freshman, I was happy running around class. He's like 8-2, and I'm like 8-2. Everyone's like 8-2. What are you talking about? I'm like, oh, it's my number. So he called everyone by their athletic number. So he had all these isms, but those were probably the most memorable to me. And to what everyone was saying earlier, the people that have the most impact or had the most impact in the school were the janitors, like Dickie James. That guy was like a hero. Every day he brought something from his closet. It's like magical. Oh, you need this? I got a magic eraser. What do you need? Mr. Allen, not so much. There was a guy in the middle school named Harry Lamb.
Yes.
So Harry Lamb worked for the schools forever. I love the guy. Couldn't get over his name, but he was definitely memorable. Definitely memorable. So.
We called him in the middle school. We had two of them. I think one's last name was Lees.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that right? We called him Spritle and Chim Chim, which was the Speed Racer cartoon that was on after school. But Spritle and Chim, and they responded to it. They're like, okay, whatever.
Real quick, I had a great softball coach my freshman year. And I'm only calling her out because she just walked in the door. Tammy Brameyer.
I moved here when you guys were, I moved here like 85 or whatever, and was able to coach. And I coached Beth. I coached Beth in tennis. So it's just a pleasure to watch this right now. So I'm taking it off of me.
No.
Normally I love this, but
Anyone else or?
So Jody Vantine was 4th grade for me, teacher. She was the sweetest lady. She really was. The memory I have of her, just always, oh my gosh, she loved the Peanuts characters. Her room was always decorated with Peanuts. She had a big Woodstock and Snoopy that used to sit on her desk. And she just always knew how to connect with kids. And if you had her, oh my gosh, you were so lucky. There's just some people that have a gift. Don't. And she was definitely one of them. She was good. And then make you laugh, Sharon Stone. Senior year, we had her for English, and she was my Sunday school teacher sometimes. And I'll never forget, I think it was freshman year, maybe or sophomore year. And it's when the teachers used to do skits for homecoming. And all of a sudden, the skit, they start coming out, the teachers. And then there's this woman that I can't see, fully dressed in a leather black cat with a whip, and just takes this whip and whips it. And somebody said, "That's Mrs. Stone." And I just remember thinking, that's my Sunday school teacher. Oh, and that was the teacher skit that they did. But and I loved Mr. Mason at the elementary school. Back, my oldest is named Mason. I loved Mr. Mason. Again, a gift to work. Just had a connection with people. He was a great guy. Teachers?
It's okay if you
guys-
don't.
I'm good too.
Something that I think we probably want to hit on, just because no other era can talk about it, but was the space shuttle. And a lot of us, maybe not Ben, were at school when it happened, when the Challenger blew up.
I was watching it.
Go ahead.
I think I might have been in Mr. Hill's class. I was a senior, and he turned it on for us to watch this really important piece of history, and it exploded. And I just remember he walked over and very quietly turned it off, and then we just had a discussion, and it was pretty quiet the rest of that period. But yeah, I'll never forget that.
I was in middle school.
I was going to say we were 8th grade.
Yeah, we were in middle school. And I remember walking by the principal's office, not that I was in it. I was grabbing our lunch because we were allowed to get our lunch and go to our classroom to watch it. And it just happened to be that I heard just in the hallway, walking by myself, all gasps and people like just saying things. And of course, I couldn't get up the stairs fast enough. And so I missed all of it. But I just remember coming back and TV was off and everybody was very quiet. So
Well, Mrs. Plate was.
Do you want to give that to your sister?
Yeah, she was
be
like-
one of those selected to
Right.
be the teacher in space. So
Right.
I think everybody was really, that's why the teachers were really into allowing us to watch it.
Yeah.
Tracy was just,
But-
Tracy Cliff was just a couple years.
Jay,
older in
Jay was
class.
Jay was in our class.
Yeah, so it was
Tragic.
we had a girls basketball game that night. And I remember holding it together most of the day, but then when they started the national anthem before the game, it was like,
Okay, and then to piggyback on, I mean, this is the ages here, the spread, the Opera House fire. And I mean, we were sort of talking about it beforehand, about where, we were, or what we saw. So the big one
Yeah.
is what we're talking about. Because there, if you don't know, there were two.
So I was not on the fire department. Anybody who knows me knows that no. Siblings were, and at the time my two older brothers were, and we lived, like I said, on College Street. And so I remember them going, and I remember walking up with my mom. I think you were with us, Leanne.
I was already there. I got there before the
Oh.
first engine. I was on my bicycle.
Okay. And so I just remember standing in front of the Methodist church with my mom and just the town and everybody just watching. And I remember how nervous my mom was because my mom had never seen my brothers actually in action like that. Because this is a small town, you don't get big fires like that. And I just remember her being very nervous watching my brothers just up on ladders. And one of them was in the alley between the Episcopal Church and the Opera House. And I remember hearing stories later about how part of that had fallen. And my older brother, Brian, happened to be in that area. So it was
Let me have that
Oh, yeah.
because your sister has a great
Yeah.
story about your mom.
Oh, yeah. So, yes, so
Yeah, there's pictures.
the tones went off. My brothers headed up College Street. I jumped on my bike and came up Broadway and got there as they were coming in. And the whole town was standing there. I don't think there was a dry eye in town. And that's when I noticed my mom and Amy. And my mom happened to be looking at the person that was on the end of the ladder truck that's parked out front. You see a lot of the pictures, the book that's behind Ben's head there. That's our oldest brother, Bob, on the end of that ladder. And the smoke started to move in and you couldn't really see who it was. And then when the smoke cleared again, my mom was like, basically kind of paraphrasing, like, who's the idiot in the smoke up on that? Like, that's Bob. At that point, I think that's when it really kind of set in. I was like, oh, okay, that's not so great. I didn't tell her that Brian was in the alley in probably a worse position, but yeah, that was incredible. I've been focused so much on the fire that at one point, then I turned around to look, and that's when you realize that I don't think there was anybody that wasn't there. I mean, everybody in town was standing in a street spot watching. And the next day, of course, for town, it smelled like smoke for weeks. And I remember that was 82.
82.
So we were still at the old middle school that we were just talking about. And I remember being in the home ec class and we were probably tossing food or something out the window because we had the window open. And yeah, we all dumped whatever burned into the bushes below. And so we had that window open and the wind, of course, was blowing. And so for several days, you could just still smell the Opera House because it just broke your heart. I still have a T-shirt that I keep thinking I'm going to donate to the Historical Society. I think it was a fundraiser that maybe Mr. Hill might have been behind. I don't know, but it's a T-shirt of the Opera House in a mason jar, and it says "Preserve Granville." And I had it on a teddy bear for a long time, and I keep thinking I'm going to donate it, but it's.
have a bag that I think that you guys have asked me for. When I die, I'll give it to you. But it
I'm gonna
is
give
a
it to
bag
Sam
from
tonight, though.
the little shop that was underneath
Mm.
Children's Corner, and it's a little teal plastic bag, and it's got the perfect sketch of the building of the Opera House, and I've always kept it. I don't know why, but I always have kept it. So it's in mint condition.
Let me give it to Sam and see if he has. Sam, you have anything you want to add? Because you were there.
Yeah, I was second fireman on the scene at the Opera House, and I think I had the first hose in on the first floor where the chickens started the fire, and then we very quickly saw that wasn't going to work. We weren't going to get it from there. And the best thing is, though, the Granville Fire Department had prepared for that fire, and that's why there was a water curtain that went up in the alley to protect St. Luke's, because we knew if the Opera House really caught on fire that St. Luke's was going to need to be prepared and the village hall behind. So I think it was preparation that made it a lot better than it could have been.
And I know we had a Historical Society event where Norm Kennedy talked about it, and he said that he was part of the group in the church, and they had the hoses in the church, and all they did was stand there and watch the wall because they knew if they started laying water down, it would ruin the church. So they were waiting until they decided it worst case scenario, and luckily they never had that worst case scenario. It never.
The officer might have been Chris Bungie in the alley with Brian and Mike. Yeah, and Mike Rowley might have been on that crew that was putting in the water curtain.
No, it's funny because I was driving back from work. I worked at Pal Joey back in the day. If you remember that place, they made golf clubs. And timing wise, I think it was evening, right? I mean, it was 5:30, 6-ish. But I'm driving back from Newark and I see from Newark, you can see this big plume of smoke in the air. And you don't think much of it until you get closer and closer. And so I was real good friends with the cops. And I had convinced myself that their house was on fire, driving from Newark to Granville. And I don't know, 17 years old, and panicking that my friend's house is on fire. So I didn't even go uptown. I went to their house. And at the time, Jen was working for Carl Oliverio, who owned the place down below, whatever it was called. It wasn't the Children's Corner then, it was something else. I can't. St. Ives, is that what it was back then? All right, so St. Ives, and she was already uptown because of the fire. So I got to their house. They tell me fire, so I leave my car there and we walk uptown. And to your point, sat there and watched, and that's all you could do. And it was unbelievable this little town to lose that monument. It was unbelievable.
Okay, let's do more positive now. Hangouts besides the Spring Valley, of course it might change from 82 to 93, but go Ben, go.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I gotta look at my notes.
We used to go to Elms after middle school dances, and before basketball games, we used to go to Aladdin's and load up on French fries and chocolate shakes, because that's always a good team.
And Harold's.
Yes.
We used to go to Harold's. Yeah.
We took away after.
Yeah. I'm just gonna stick with the PG version.
All right, I'll go PG 17. So, do you recall being allowed to be emancipated in high school, where your parents would sign a waiver and said, "You're 18, you can live on your own"? Give that some thought for a high schooler. So we had two. We had John Averill and Bill Haskell. Bill Haskell lived in the apartments across from the old middle school. That was our hangout.
Oh. Enough said.
It was bad. I mean, in a good way, in a funny way. I mean, but we had double lunch, right? So this is funny. So so we were in journalism,
grab the mic,
and
Jen?
we sold ads for journalism, for the yearbook and for the paper and everything else. So we would have
Do I grab the mic?
study hall, journalism, double lunch, study hall. So we had 5 periods where we would check out of school and go sell ads, and we'd sell 1 or 4 ads maybe. And we'd fund the yearbook and we'd fund the newspaper. And then for the other 4 hours, just hang out. We go to Love's Pond. There's another hangout, which is in Maplewood. Whatever. Love's Pond was where Metzger's lived and Zazworski's and whatever now. But the pond in Maplewood, and we would hang out there all day long. But Haskell's apartment was our class hangout, and
Is that the house that the Denison students used to sunbathe on?
I have no idea.
No, it's the apartments right next to it, but you're talking about the
Yellow house.
yellow house on the corner.
Yeah.
And Mr. Fenneker's class, the boys, they would play out.
Pass it to Kristen.
Mr. Rector used to own that.
Oh, yeah.
He's talking about those little apartments.
I know now
Yes.
where JD lives.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The house next to it's when Denison students could live off campus. And so they rented it. And during science class in Mr. Feniger's class, I remember that the boys were always somewhat preoccupied with looking out the window instead of paying attention to the, science lesson we were learning. So
Yeah, any class facing west.
yeah, that house was, yeah.
Yeah, my sister-in-law lived in that house. Did Mr. Finnegar do like the fake brick joke on you guys?
No.
Here, let's let her.
No, what's that one?
Well, here you
I
go.
remember Kit Kat can, Delta Pop.
No, yes.
Yeah, Delta Papa.
No, Mr. Finnegar would have this fake brick, and like probably the first week of school or something, he would walk over to someone and be like, "Oh," and pretend to drop it, but it was really just like
Styrofoam.
sponge.
Yeah. While we're Mhm.
She used to throw erasers.
and those were real. Yeah.
We talking about hangouts? Is that what we're
Sure,
still
sure,
hanging
sure,
out?
sure.
I always tried to hit Mark Barno, and he would duck, and I was sitting behind him, and I'd always get hit.
Bad positioning.
Right, exactly. Sign seating that year.
I think for me, hangouts, as most in Granville, when Taylor's Drugs were there, Taylor's Drugs, the little steel bars that are now still in front of Village Coffee. I can't tell you how many buttocks have sat on that over the years. That was one hangout. I know I had a good friend of mine, George Kaufman, who his mother used to tell him when he would come spend the night at our house, if I see you hanging out in front of Taylor's, you're in trouble. We weren't doing anything other than hanging out. I think in high school hangout, there was a place off of Lafayette Road. We called it the Bat Cave. A lot of high schoolers would go out there and drink water. So Bat Cave was kind of a high school hangout. When it was interesting, I was telling my sister Becky a couple days ago, we were fortunate. There was a small group of us, and I was talking to John Lucier earlier. Myself, David Offs, and a few other people, and John Bean. I don't know if you remember the Bean family, but the old curator of the Avery Hunter Museum basically let us build forts in the basement. And so we had it was like a meeting area, the bike gang. We would meet in the basement of Avery Hunter Museum. There's a chapel in the basement. And basically there was, at the time, was filled with all this excess wood. And he was like, you guys can do whatever you want down here. And so we literally built these forts in the basement of Avery Hunter Museum. And we had open rain. I mean, we could come and go. So it was like for a couple of my friends and I, we would go as kind of a hangout place for us when we were younger. But I think that's it as far as hangouts.
Does anybody in the crowd have stories that have just popped up and you want to talk about, Laura? No, you just had a grin, and I was like, Laura? No? Any?
Coffee house.
Here.
I mean,
Go ahead.
I loved going to the coffee house, and that was, they would have dances there. We had disco lessons there with Granville Rec. It was the first place I had cream soda. I remember the old pop machine that opened up and you could pull out. My parents actually chaperoned there when my sister was in high school, and so I got to work behind the candy counter. And when you walked straight up the steps, there was this beautiful long glass candy case, and all the candy was behind that. And then they would show movies, and they were like Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy, King Kong, and we all loved them. I mean, sitting there watching the movies. But there was foosball, and it just became a very popular thing for our generation. I know early 80s middle school, that was definitely the place to go.
Our middle school dances with coffee.
Our middle school dances were all at the school,
Yeah.
on the stage.
Yeah.
It was above Granville.
Above Granvilla.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
you go up these steps. It's now offices and redesigned.
Right.
But Granville was a little shoebox.
Mm-hmm.
And then to the right of the front door, you'd walk up these steps, probably, I don't know, 20 steps.
There were a lot
22
of steps,
And
and I think it was,
Yeah.
if I remember
But there was a
correctly, it was
bowling
like,
alley. I mean, it was
Yeah.
well constructed.
it was like 50 cents to get in, or a quarter. But the best part of walking up those steps was the smell of Granvilla pizza. It was the best, for sure.
Granville JC's do like haunted house
They did.
Yeah.
They
did
did.
the
And that
haunted
was like
house.
my 8th grade year. And
Yeah.
it was completely pitch black. And I remember they made you crawl through, you went in and it was literally just a series of cardboard boxes, I think, but the lights were off and we all had costumes on. And we were crawling through these boxes in the coffee house. And that's what it was, which was pretty crazy.
Record store?
Yes, I do
Yeah,
remember the record store.
I don't want to interrupt you, but
Is that what it was called? I couldn't remember the name
It was
of
up
it.
there.
It was
Yeah.
above Elms.
There was-
Was it above
Oh.
Elms? It was just, it was the, no,
it was
actually
there for
Subway.
probably that long.
Yeah, it was there for a hot minute. But it was right above not Elms, Subway. And you used to go up the stairs and it had records. I remember we used to go there and get Duran Duran buttons. And don't laugh. But I remember they had like stickers and buttons and records and I think, was it t-shirts? Like it didn't have a lot of stuff and it was very small, but it was there for a hot minute. But
They did sell rolling papers for tobacco.
Oh.
I just want to let you know that.
I did not partake.
I'm just throwing that out there. No, Jay's Records. I was one of those places. I was going to mention it earlier. It's kind of like Shumway Hardware. I mean, Shumway was down by IGA for a while, but Jay's Records is one of those places that opened up for what, maybe like 6 months, you know. And we as kids were like, oh, we love vinyl, you know. And he would play vinyl if you want, whatever you wanted. At the time, I think it was Van Halen. You know, we're like Van Halen, but he would play records, and you could just kind of walk around the store. But it was mostly all like probably 90% vinyl, and the rest was a few other items. If you wanted to buy them, they were always kind of behind the counter. So.
Papa Chains was also in that building.
Oh yeah.
It was there
Yeah.
for like a year.
What was it?
It
Sorry.
was called Papa Chains. It was
Okay.
on the side of the Elms complex. There was like a little place. I think it was actually somebody that was in your class. Mom, was that Phillips? Was that Helen Phillips that opened Papa Chains?
Yeah.
I think that's who it was. Anyway,
Oh,
not
You're
that
okay. No. Two things that came up just in that conversation, I thought of the rec commission and things that you might have done, and then also jobs. I mean, we've talked about being lifeguard at Spring Valley, but maybe some other things, like Annie Welsh. Where did you work?
I worked at Young's
Here.
Apothecary with my grandma. Gosh. Well, first I worked for Omega Pest Control answering the telephone. But then I worked with grandma up at Young's after school. But then grandma left, grandma was off work by then.
But she would come in occasionally.
Yeah. And that's where I was killed during senior tag. And
No. It
then
was,
eventually I worked at Knuckleheads. Other than that, I was babysitting for all the other kids in town.
I did Knucklehead, Denison Library.
Oh, yeah. I worked with Peter at the Denison Library.
Yeah.
Forgot about that.
And then one of the beauty shops, like when I was 14, just cleaning brushes. No, it was no, she was on Prospect. I can't think of her name.
It was, no, she had two. She had the one where,
And then she moved to Hankinson.
yeah, the house that
Oh,
I used to-
Angie's Country Girl.
Yeah.
Angie.
Angie.
Booth.
Angie.
She was downtown.
So she paid me, like under the table, 14-year-old, just cleaning brushes.
So my job when I moved to Granville, I delivered papers in Maplewood. So I had 17 customers, which is no big deal, right? But Maplewood, big, huge hill. But that was my thing. The funny thing was, and I need to mention her name. My papers were dropped off in your old house on Granger Street, right? So the house next door to the school, where my papers were dropped off. The school wouldn't let me get them. So I wasn't allowed to pick my papers up 6 feet away from where the buses come out.
Mm-hmm.
And Mrs. Milford, God rest her soul, she was like, that makes no sense. She goes, go get your papers. I'll cover for you. Every day. I mean,
Really?
every single day.
I think Kristen
That
has
woman
one
took
either.
care of me. But my paper route I had, I don't know, for 5 or 6 years. But because of her, I was allowed to actually get my papers that were literally from me to that chair from the, but the school wouldn't let me do it. But she said, just go do it. I got you.
I think Kristen has.
So I was lucky enough to work with a man I think was a legend in Granville, Ron Engel,
Mm.
at Harold's. And he was just a really good, nice man. He lived in our neighborhood, so I knew him that way too. But I think a lot of kids grew up working at Knuckleheads. I know my kids did. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Ron because he was pretty special.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I know I threw rec commission in. Did anybody have anything?
The thing I miss about the rec commission is one, all the things were played local. There's no travel. But I loved, do you remember you would have a shirt? You was two, they were sewn together. It was so hot. And so it was like a blue shirt and then a white shirt. And so you'd show up and they'd be like, you're the blue team. So you'd run in the bathroom. Well, the guys didn't have to. We'd run in the bathroom, turn the shirt inside out, and then throw it on. But playing basketball with two t-shirts on, that was hot. So, and it ended at sixth grade. Now it goes beyond sixth grade. Back then it stopped, at least for us. I feel like at sixth grade because school sports started. But you have some.
No, I'm good.
Does anybody remember when the Granville JCs?
Yes.
And they had the family fling at it was at the high school, and it was called Family Fling. And I remember we would go, and our high school had, each classroom had like something set up. So there were games and there was food like sloppy joes. It was kind of like Oxford-y type food. Another thing that
I was going to
missed
bring that up
terribly.
too.
But yeah, and I don't know what happened to the JCs. I think they just kind of probably dissolved, but that they did a lot in the community, and that family fling was a big deal and a big fundraiser for the community. But that was
I don't
fun.
remember it. We're getting close to 8. I'm not gonna cancel, stop this, but that's what I was just gonna ask if anybody had any
I
other.
was just going to say, I was a parent and we lived in West Maple Street for a couple of years.
Can you say your name? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Carol Apaki.
We weren't doing that. I realized. Sorry.
But I remember kindergartners, first graders, second graders, all walked. The streets were filled with kids. And they'd stop at Buck Sargent's after school and he'd get them some cheese. And there was a couple, I can't think of their names, that would pass out cookies. And the streets, instead of school buses, everybody in the village walked.
Mhm.
It was marvelous. And our kids would, come home full of adventures and not on the hot bus. I'd love to think of kids walking that live in the village again.
Yeah.
Instead of all the school buses.
Anybody else have something?
About fundraisers. Do you remember like donkey basketball?
Yeah.
Donkey basketball. And the JCs, they had the haunted house and some of that. Also, didn't we have like always a talent night? Wasn't there like a big talent show?
Still have their program.
Yeah. So there were. Yeah.
The entire community came.
They were big community events that people would do.
And it was all ages. It was middle school and high school.
Right.
All involved.
So when you said family fling, I started thinking of all those basketball games with the donkeys on the basketball floor and the high school and
Okay, we need to explain because there's a couple faces that look very confused. I remember it. It was literally a basketball game and the players were riding donkeys in the gym. Yeah.
But it was people in the community that you knew and teachers. I think I remember a few of the teachers,
Yeah.
played the teachers. Yeah.
Because it was a fundraiser.
Yeah.
Your 5 or 6 or 8 guys, and the teachers would have
Here.
5 or 6 guys,
Yeah.
and you were on donkeys, literally trying to go up and down the court, which is impossible on a donkey. Right. Yeah. And the teachers, see, we were all younger, but the teachers pre-gamed. There was a little tailgate party ahead of the donkey basketball game for the teachers.
Was it also part of the fire department though? Because I feel like there was a reason for us to go. Okay, maybe we just went.
I thought schools.
Well, maybe that's why we quit.
People would run
Right.
around.
And the
There
floors,
were
I'm sure the
donkey
school-
farms, and they would rent their donkeys out for donkey basketball.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened after that.
I'll go ahead.
But that night it was hilarious.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it was. Any other stories? I mean, we could go on forever probably tonight, but Greg, do you want to close out? Here.
Talk about music for a second.
Music?
Music, go right ahead. Big deal. No, so it's because one of our prompts was music in the 80s. So the late 70s and early 80s,
I was just
which
running
was
out of time.
my
They told me
heyday,
to go tell you.
was probably the greatest era of music of all time. Only because we had no, but hear me out for a second. We had the 60s and 70s to our, running into it, which we all listened to. And then the 80s was the beginning of kind of like the alternative mix stuff, and Jennifer and I talk about this all the time, that about 84, 85, 86, music changed, just completely changed. But for this town, and what I wanted to say was having WDUB spinning records up on the hill was unbelievable. And we got to know those guys. And a few of like Gallagher and Sharp and those guys, they'd go up there and DJ. I mean, we're in high school and we're hanging out with these students who are running WDUB, playing all this great music. And so that all filtered downhill. And literally, that was our music. And we had, maybe I'm biased, but it was great music at the time. And to this day, that's what we listen to. I mean, kind of funny. So, whatever.
Pass it to Greg, actually.
So if you think you're done, we'll go with that. We could go longer. Thank everybody for coming. Thank our panel, our esteemed panel. One thing I did learn is Ben Barton had a violent childhood. Okay. We'll get into that later. But thank everybody for showing up and appreciate it. And we're actually going to do the 90s.
That was a gasp.
I don't know. Did we mark a month for that?
March, probably.
Probably March next year. So get your stories ready. So, but thanks everybody for coming. I'm gonna go.
Thank you.